In this tutorial, I'm going to first briefly go over layer filters. Then after that, and the majority of this video, I'll be discussing layer states. A lot of people don't actually know what the layer states are, and there's actually a lot of confusion between layer filters and layer states. Although they can be used kind of for the same thing, they are different. So first I'll mention that this dialog box right here is the layer properties manager, and I can get to the layer states manager either by clicking this button right here or typing layer states at the command prompt. If you do use this often, it would be smart to create a command alias for layer states. Okay, so first I'm going to show you how to create layer filters. We're going to do that through the layer properties manager. So there's actually two types of filters. One is the property filters, and the other is the group filter. The second one is the one I actually use. I've never used the property filter. I've only learned how to use it, but I've never ever used it. But anyways, when you make a properties filter, let's call this no plot layers. You select from the same properties that are in your layers dialog, as you might have guessed. And here we have plot. I'm just going to put that to no plot. And like I mentioned, I only use the group filters, but I just wanted to show you how to create a properties filter first, just in case that's a useful tool for yourself. Okay, so next I'm going to show you how to make a group filter. So when comparing group filters to layer states, group filters, I'd say I find them easier to create. There's less little settings you have to worry about that could throw you off. And if you're just doing things like turning on and off groups of layers or locking groups of layers, the layer filter group will work just fine for that. But for other operations and for speed, the layer states are actually quite a bit better. So anyways, we're just going to click this icon to make a new group filter. I'm just going to name this hatches. I'm going to go back to all used layers. I'm going to scroll down and find where my hatch layers begin. I'm going to do a shift select. And now I'm just going to drag all these layers into hatches. And now I've created that group filter, and you can drag layers out of this. You can do whatever you want, really. So if you wanted to lock all these once, you just do a shift select. Lock them, unlock them, same with turning them off, on. And I almost forgot one last thing before moving on to layer states, is to remove items from the group. You just do what I just did there. You just click on them, right click, and there should be a remove from group filter right there. Okay, next we're going to move on to layer states. You can click this button right here or type layer state at the command prompt. If you use it often, I'd recommend making a command alias, just like ls or whatever. So anyways, to create a new layer state, as you might have guessed, oh, I almost forgot to show you something. When you first open up AutoCAD, this will kind of be minimized. It's very likely you're going to have to work with this, so I would just leave this button right here pressed so you have access to this. And there's kind of, I don't think it's an AutoCAD like a glitch or a bug, but sometimes these settings won't save, and I'll explain that in just a little bit here. So to create a layer state, just go new and name the layer state, Well, it's an important time to tell you that a good practice with layer states is to name something. Let's name it my default settings. This is important because layer states can change every layer property and it's hard to keep track of. So it's a good idea to have a layer state that just basically has all your layers, like the colors, the line types, and everything, set to your default settings in case you have another layer state that changes those settings unintentionally. I'm going to go to Edit, just make sure every layer in my drawing is included, and I think I'll just remove layer 0. So I'll explain this a little better in a few minutes. I'm going to go to Save. Okay, so we're just about ready to create our actual first layer state that does something. I'm just going to put the hash mark in front of this so it stays at the top. I'm going to go to New. Name this Lock Hatch Layers. So the first thing I'm going to go to is Edit. I'm going to remove every layer that we're not going to use. All of those. You may have guessed that to add layers, you just click on that. The other thing we have to do here is change any properties. What I'm going to do is lock all of these. Going to go to Save. I'm going to double click on this. You can see, hopefully it's not too small, but the lock, see, it won't let me erase that because all my hatch layers are now locked. So I'm going to go back into layer state. Another important thing to show you is that these properties, you only want the properties that you're actually using checked. Because one example is, let's say you're adjusting your standards and you change the colors of layers. When you use this lock hatch layers, it's still going to change the colors on you. Okay, so our layer state's working as intended. I'm just going to inform you of one of the issues I've found with layer states, and I'll just give you an example. Let's say you're still adjusting your AutoCAD standards, or you change the color of a layer. So with this layer state, all we want to do is lock the layers. But if you change your layer's colors, and then you use this layer state after, it's still going to change the colors on us. And that applies to actually every property. So one thing that's a really good practice is to uncheck every property you're not using and only have the properties checked that you want to edit with the layer state. Remember, to get there or to open up this window to full, you just click on this little icon. And that kind of helped me introduce the next little, I guess, glitch or bug, is that this won't save. So I'm going to uncheck all of these. It doesn't really save it. So I'm going to go to Close. I'm going to go to Layer State again. And they're all still checked, right? So the only way to save these settings is to actually engage the layer state. See, now it's going to be saved, and when I click on my default settings, which will unlock all my hatches, and click on this again, so that's one of the biggest problems I had when I was first learning layer states, is that all these settings were never saving, and I was just having a chaos with colors and line types and stuff changing on me. Okay, so I'm going to create one more layer state. Let's name it gray out. On this, we're going to only change layer colors. Let's go to edit. We have all our layers in there. So some of these colors didn't change because the transparency, or sorry, the object property is overridden. So for example, this green hatch is, the layer it's on is not green. I've overridden the hatch's color to green, as you can see here. Okay, I'm going to go back into here. So the only reason I created that layer state is because one very useful feature of layer states is that you can apply them through viewports. So if I go to layer, layer properties dialog, you notice all my my main properties, I want to call them, are, I should go to all use layers there. I still got my group filter showing that I created earlier. But anyways, you can see VP color, that stands for, of course, viewport color. It's all set to 253, or at least the layers in my layer state. But if I go back to model space, everything's just my, my normal colors. So depending on how you draft, being able to apply layer states to viewports is an incredibly powerful tool. Okay, just for a little bit of practice, and there's something I still got to show you, we're going to edit the gray out layer state. So one thing I noticed is that the lock is on, and the reason for that is when you create a new layer state, it'll automatically grab your current properties, and that makes sense. But if you use a different layer state and you forgot that it does something, then your new layer state is going to also have those properties, right? So this lock here was grabbed from the lock hatch layers layer state. But what I'm going to do with these actually is I'm going to freeze them. I'm going to go to save. Now remember, I have to change this, then apply the layer state. So I'm going to check that, double click on that. So this house is something I drafted a few years ago, and I think it was just portfolio work or just to test things out. So some of my stuff isn't on the correct layers. That's why you're seeing some stuff stay kind of visible, but doesn't really matter as I'm only discussing layer states anyways. So anyways, we've edited this layer state. You can see that my properties are actually taking hold. So I'm just gonna, before ending this video, I'm just gonna review a few things. So the first thing we'll review is creating a new layer state. I'm going to click new. Just name it test. So all the properties are automatically checked when you create a new layer state. I'm going to go into edit. And as you can see, it grabs whatever properties are currently active in my drawing. And this might not be what you want. So I'm going to go to cancel. And that's why I highly recommend, when you first start out, create a layer state with your default settings. To edit layer states, you just click edit. I'll show you what this update. Okay, so as for some of these other options, don't list layer states in Xrefs. This I usually have it checked. You might not want to, but I highly recommend having it checked unless you have a clear defined reason not to. Turn off layers not found in layer state. This I find will probably cause you more trouble than good. As you can see, it does exactly as it describes, and that has caused me a little bit of problems in the past, because as you add layers, they won't automatically be added to your layer state, and then that's another little quirk with the layer states manager, is that if that's checked, you're going to have layers turning off unexpectedly. So this option here that's grayed out, I can quickly show you that by going to my layout. I should have restored that. Apply properties as viewport overrides. I recommend having that checked, but you might have reasons not to. But that means, like, even in the same layout, I can have different viewports with different layer states. Make sure you're double clicked inside the viewport. Okay, so I just want to go back and talk about your default settings. This is something you'll want to manage and keep up to date with. I guess I forgot, I didn't tell you guys what update does. If you click update, it's going to override your layer state to whatever's active in the drawing. So that means if this grayout or the locked hatch layers was active, it would actually put that over top of this. Be aware of that. I do use that sometimes, but you got to be really, really careful. I'm going to close this. I go to layer, and I go to new. Layer. Let's make that red. Let's go back into layer state. My default settings. Let's go to edit. So that layer's not appearing yet. I'm gonna go there. So now I've added it, right? So let's say I want to change that to green. Let's go to save, my default settings, layer. So remember, I changed it in the viewport. I was actually wanted to be outside of the viewport, which I think I was. Oh, I know what I did. Let's go to edit. So let's say you're updating your standards and you really want this to be red. So you change it, you get all your layers, your colors, they're all perfect. But then you forget to change that. So it's going to change your layer back to that whatever color you had in your layer state, right? So I'm just going to scan here, make sure I don't have anything locked that I don't want locked or anything. I got this turned off, right? That's because earlier to demonstrate I said turn off layers not found in layer state, so it turned off layer 0 on me. So you can kind of see the little things you'll have to deal with layer states. Once you get it set up, it works just about perfectly, but the setup of the layer states, I guess, is the hard part. So this, I'm going to go to update. It's going to overwrite it. And I'll go in there, I'll go to edit. And now you can see my new layer. It's not that green color. It's grabbed the red from my actual drawing and applied it to that layer. Okay, so before finishing off this video, I just wanted to talk about the differences, the advantages and disadvantages of layer states and layer filters. So I'll just go to the hatches here again, or maybe I'll go to all use layers. I'll grab all these, just put those back in there just so I have more to work with. So the filters, they actually make it easier, yeah, to create layer states, because I could freeze all these, right? Then I could open the layer states manager, and then I could click new. So you can actually use the filters and the layer states together. If you're uncomfortable with the layer states, as you saw that even as I'm making the video, there's a couple things that I didn't expect to happen. Once you get the layer states set up, and it's way easier to set them up and have them stay correctly set up when your standards are defined and static. If your standards and your drawing colors, your layer colors and stuff are always changing, the layer states can cause a lot of trouble. So the layer filters, it allows you to grab a bunch of layers all at once and apply properties as needed. It's quite manual. The layer state, you can type it at the command prompt. You can make an alias. Mine is normally just ls for layer states, but I don't actually use layer states on my computer at home, so I don't have that alias set up yet. But when you get an alias set up with the layer states dialog, you can switch between the layer states super fast. It's way faster than using these group filters. Way faster, but due to all those little settings and all those little quirks and stuff, it's sometimes you'll get unexpected results. Okay, so I was going to finish off the video there, but I decided to tack one last thing onto it. I'm going to make sure my default settings are applied to my layout. So I'm in a layout right now, not model space. I'm going to go new, red title block. Uncheck all these. They'll probably recheck on me, but whatever. And I go edit and get rid of all this. Let's get rid of that. Don't need that in here. Take all these. I'm just going to turn them to red. Click OK. Click Save. Red title block. Double click. My title block's now red. But in every other layout, it's still blue, right? I'm going to go to model space. I'm going to go to my layer properties. All use layers. And everything's still my default colors. I'm going to go back to here. Layer state. Default settings. So each layout has a layer state. Each viewport will apply a layer state, and of course model space has a layer state. Okay, so that's about the best I can explain the layer states and the layer filters in a video about as long as this one. It's actually dragged out a little longer than expected. I'm sure I've missed at least one or two situations or conditions. Maybe I've never encountered them before myself, or just never thought about it in this video. So anyways, one, if you do have any questions, just please ask in the comments below. And two, if this is your first look at layer states, I highly recommend either making an AutoCAD file with, say, 5 or 10 layers in it, or doing a save as so you don't wreck anything important, and just experimenting with all these settings, using them in model space, in paper space through a viewport. If all else fails, remember that the layer filters, you can do everything you can do with layer states with the layer filters. The real advantage to the layer states is speed, and that only applies once you get them set up and set up correctly.